Hi, Ruby.
Hey, Kyla.
Good to have you. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's nice to connect with a fellow Canadian.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Isn't it? Yeah, I've followed you online for years, and this feels just like a really, really sweet. I've always really loved what you've been sharing, and I've watched the transition. At least it's looked like a transition in the last few years into more medicine work, and that really excites me. And you're the first person I've had on the podcast that I know I can go into that with. So I'm really excited. Hopefully there's space to talk about some medicine work. But can I just right out of the gates ask you before we even get to know you, what are you currently reclaiming?
Yeah, so many things. I would say to sum it up, I am currently reclaiming myself,
Mhm.
my whole self after a couple years of just being in deep trauma.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you for that.
Of
Yeah.
course.
Is that something that you're open to opening up a little bit and diving into?
Yes, and because of a legal situation, there's only so
Ah,
much I can share. Mhm.
beautiful, beautiful. Okay, yeah. So tell those who don't know who you are just a little snippet, whatever you want. Share whatever aspect of yourself you feel to share, but tell the people who you are a little bit about what you do in this world.
Yeah, my name is Ruby Fremon. I am a trauma trained coach, spiritual guide, and sacred medicine practitioner. And I specialize in supporting leaders and facilitators who are devoted to leading with integrity in a world filled with performers. The foundation of my work is the inner work. It's focused on trauma healing so that leaders and facilitators can then share within their spaces from a more grounded place. They can serve from a place of servitude versus trauma. They can lead and create messaging and share their teachings from a place of love versus projections of their own trauma, which is a lot of what we are seeing in our world
Yeah.
today.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So is there a way, spidey senses, is there a way that people can kind of feel out if their facilitators or leaders are coming from a good place or not? What is the how?
I mean, it, so if you're feeling shamed in the spaces that you're in, then whoever's leading those spaces is definitely leading from a place of trauma. If you're
Yeah.
feeling less than or
Yeah.
belittled, or as if you just can't get shit right,
Yeah.
then you're not in a safe space. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's so much of what we're seeing in, especially social media, the shaming. We're living in this
Mhm.
like shame, cancel culture, weird phenomenon that's taking place,
Yeah.
which is essentially just a lot of people placing themselves on pedestals, trying to position themselves as better than by pushing other people underneath them.
Yeah. Thank you so much for bringing this like right out of the gates because I, I really appreciate that. It feels really good to hear. Now, where did you like? How did this land in your lap? Because this is really important work. It's really important work, and I'm curious how you found it or how it found you.
Oh, okay. So I have been coaching for almost a decade now. I started coaching in 2014 as a certified life coach, went on to do NLP, timeline therapy, and now I am currently in Dr. Peter Levine's 3-year somatic experiencing practitioner program. I would
Yeah,
say that what led me into coaching in the first place was just inspiration through my own journey of hitting rock bottom, of being an addict, of finding myself in a cycle of abusive relationships, and then finally coming upon the world of personal development and really loving what that was all about.
mhm,
But for me, it started just through sharing transparently online, like
yeah,
sharing snippets of my story back in 2012, having a blog and just sharing what I was going through with people.
mhm,
And back then, I was working in nightlife, producing anywhere from like 7,000 person shows to like 100-person intimate concerts, working with some of the world's top DJs, producers, artists, So it was a real like coming out for me to share the pieces of me that I was hiding and masking with alcohol and drugs. So it
Mm-hmm.
started back then. And when I became a coach and was on my own healing journey, the direction and evolution of my coaching really happened organically. I started off being a self love coach, focusing on that aspect of it. Then I focused on transformational coaching. And then it really quickly became obvious to me that my focus wanted to be leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Mostly because at the time I was living in LA and hanging out with all these LA based cool, like influencer leader people, and was shocked at how different they would be in person
Yeah.
versus in their post persona. And to
Mm-hmm.
me, that's like a major red flag. That to me
Mm-hmm.
screams trauma. That to me screams insecurity. And so here we
Mm-hmm.
have all these so called leaders with
Mm-hmm.
huge platforms leading these uh, like spaces that are either performance driven or trauma inducing or both.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And that didn't sit right for me. You know, for me, leadership is a bigger calling. It's like we're entering this space in human well, we've been in the space in humanity where leadership needs to change. The old paradigm of leadership of like the typical CEO
Yeah.
speaking at their audience from a microphone or a megaphone, like that shit's got to die. That shit is
Yeah.
dying. It has been dying for a while. So what's next? What is it that
Mm-hmm.
our humanity, our collective, our world actually truly needs? And that is leaders who are willing to just show up, be transparent, see themselves as human beings,
Mm-hmm.
really integrate themselves with the people, with their communities, see their audiences as communities and not audiences, and
Mm-hmm.
just bring the humanity back into their leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when things began to evolve. And then trauma work, um, that came in again organically just through my own experiences and having worked with so many clients over almost 10 years. Like it just became obvious that there was a common thread. I work with a
Mm-hmm.
lot of POC. I think they just feel really comfortable with me because I am Indian. And so I do attract a lot of POC. I also work with, I would say, like it's pretty even, like 50% men, 50% women. And something that they all had in common, other than wanting to elevate their leadership or their presence, is the big T traumas that they would bring. And as
Mm-hmm.
a certified life coach, NLP practitioner, I do have a scope of practice. And that scope of practice didn't allow me to dive deeper into the trauma work.
Yeah.
And it just became really obvious that this was something that I yearned to do, but I wanted to do responsibly. And
Mm-hmm.
so, out of all the trauma trained modalities out there, the one that spoke to me the loudest was SE work because I myself have experienced SE work. I myself have a therapist who does SE work. She's also a somatic experiencing practitioner. And I know the deep healing that SE work can offer.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just how I began to evolve. I'd still say I'm still in that evolution of bringing more trauma training and work into what I'm doing, but
Mm-hmm.
seeing where the world is going and how this is impacting our collective, for me to continue doing the work that I'm doing with leaders, it just felt like a this has to happen sort of situation.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Thank you for that. And SE, just for those who don't know, somatic experiencing. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, specifically Dr. Peter Levine's somatic
Mm-hmm.
experiencing, because it's important to distinguish that because so many people are using the word somatic nowadays.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you've been thrown those somatic workout ads. Like, it's just so,
I can't, I
I
can't, I
can't
can't.
stand it.
I cannot.
Somatic yoga, like
I can't.
everyone listening, all workouts are somatic.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All yoga is somatic. All
Thank
Pilates is
you.
somatic. All
Yes.
physical movement is somatic. Okay. The
Yeah.
soma is the mind body. So we're working all of that when we're working out. But somatic experiencing is a specific modality created by Dr. Peter Levine based on his research in the animal world. So he spent years researching animals and their how they move through trauma, and then
Mhm.
began to apply that on human beings and notice that there are similarities in how we process trauma, just as animals do, with
Yeah.
some differences because of our the differences in our brain functionality. But
Mhm.
it's a much slower process to trauma healing, but it's a much more effective process to truly
Yeah.
healing trauma.
Absolutely. I love Peter Levine and I've done some work with him. And, the whole thing with trauma is it's too much, too soon, too fast. And so if we're trying to heal, and I'm using quotations, we're trying to heal the trauma by like pummeling through it and like fucking get over it already kind of energy, it's gonna compound. It's gonna make it a lot worse. There has to be like I always talk about it like the tease apart. It's like so slow
Mm-hmm.
and so gentle, and your poor nervous system. Like there's just so much that we don't see on the surface that yeah, it is slow.
Mm-hmm.
And we live in such an impatient, instant gratification world where that can be, I find, really challenging for people is to permit themselves to be slow, to move through it. But holy, it's profound what can happen in a session.
Yeah, it truly is.
I'm glad you're bringing that into your work. Um, and it's so you've just started the training and it's 3 years. Is that correct? I just saw on your social media
I'm
that
I'm I'm like a third, no, two-thirds through my first year.
okay.
So in August I'll complete year one.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm in this until
Yeah.
2026.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, and and this is the thing is, again, somatics and trauma work has become, unfortunately, the next trend. And
Yeah.
with that, we're seeing a lot of weird shit, like
Yeah.
um, you know, programs that are claiming to offer trauma train modalities like breath work, and I don't even know. There, it feels like there's a program for everything.
Hmm.
But unfortunately, a lot of those don't even touch on true trauma healing. For example,
Yeah.
you can go into like a somatic breath work. I love breath work. I think it's phenomenal. And it can be really just way too activating for someone who's already got an overactive nervous system. And you can
Hmm.
actually really re traumatize people. Or on the flip side, people can experience a release, but that's a singular release. And then they're left putting the pieces back together at the end. They have no integration, they have no tools
Hmm.
to be able to work through the impact of that release.
Hmm.
Um, and so it's important that people understand, like, if you are looking for to get into trauma work, for example, then really do your due diligence and experience these different modalities before deciding on what you want to do. I
Hmm.
don't plan this far ahead ever, like ever. 3 years, that like
Hmm.
2026. And here I am devoted to this program for 3 years, which
Hmm.
seems unreal, especially given how crazy these times are. And we don't know where we're going
Yeah.
to be in
Yeah.
2026. But it was the only modality that spoke true healing for me.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And I'm going to speak to what you just shared because I am like breath work is my primary modality for the work that I do. And I spent 3 years of my training and there are people, and I talk about this, like how breath work has also become this incredibly trendy thing. And on one hand, there's this part of me that's, oh, I'm almost happy about that because it's coming to the surface and people are
Yes.
learning. And then And then you've got the weekend warriors who can take a training really, really quickly and all of a sudden become a breathwork facilitator. And
Wait, a trauma informed breathwork
well, no,
facilitator.
no,
Let's
that's what
clarify,
I'm
because yeah.
that's what I'm just about to say.
Yeah.
Is like you become a breathwork facilitator and then you have no idea how to hold someone's trauma and the breathwork that I facilitate, so conscious connected breathwork, holotropic whatever term you want to call it, its root is in trauma work. So you best believe that some stuff might come up. And
Mhm.
if you've just had a short little training, or if your training facilitation didn't go into deep trauma work, you like that's dangerous territory.
Mhm.
And so we spent 3 years in our training, and Peter Levine was one of the primary like roots that we would keep going back to, among others. And I just, it's I used to work in fitness, and I felt the same way about fitness. It's like I spent, a long time getting certified and continue to certify. And again, you could get people getting a weekend certificate and working with the human body. And I thought that was dangerous, which it is. But this is like a whole other level. And so I do share with people, like, if you are curious about any kind of somatic work, and thank you for saying, like, do your due diligence, like research who you're working with, ask questions, because it's really big work.
Mhm.
It's tender work, it's important work, and you need to really know that you are held in a good way, given that some of your stuff wants to surface. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's trendy. and and I'm just not sure. I think things that are so powerful and healing should be trendy. And I don't know how to, I don't really know how to get away from that. It is what it
Well,
is.
I
But
think what you said about breath work being like, yes, yes to more breath work coming out, yes to more facilitators, yes to more medicine facilitators, yes to all these people coming out and doing this really good work, and yes to better, more comprehensive training,
yeah.
right? Because these weekend trainings, or even like few day trainings, or even like online trainings, like
Hmm.
that is not going to really help you understand the textures and the real feeling and fluidity of how trauma can move in and out of these spaces.
Hmm.
And so again, yeah, due diligence with where you're choosing to get trained. And for those of
Hmm.
you sitting with different practitioners and facilitators, coaches, etc., do your due diligence in asking the right questions about how they've been trained.
Yeah. Yeah. And so let's go into leadership a little bit. You spoke about it, and what I was hearing and what was coming up to me is like the, leaders, and again, I'm going to use air quotes, who are telling and on that like kind of high horse and dictating how they think everything should be without that transparency. You spoke about transparency. We're that's it's like, how would I say that? It's disempowering to those who are listening, to those who are following said leader, because it can leave you, I feel, in that space of trying to then be more like that person, which is
Mm-hmm.
taking you further and further away from yourself, further and further away from your potent truth, as one might say. And there's so much magic that can happen when you're in a space with someone who, and you demonstrate it so beautifully with that full transparency. Like, this is who I am, this is what's happening, this is how I'm gonna, walk myself through it. It empowers people. It shows people that they're not alone. Okay, where I'm not alone. Someone else knows what this is like. Okay, and they can do it. They're walking through it. I can walk through it. Like, it's just to it's just it's so, I'm going to keep using the word powerful. I'm not sure if there's another word for it, but there's nothing quite like it too. Being in a space with someone where you leave and you feel like more of yourself, and you feel bigger, and you feel fuller, and you feel like you're standing taller, and your feet are grounded, like anchored in. And you don't get that from someone who's telling you how to do something and not inviting you in to experience it. So I don't know where you want to go with that, but you wrote a really beautiful couple Instagram stories. I'm not sure if it was last night or this morning. I saw them this morning, about leadership and like rehumanizing it. And can we open that up a little bit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so much here. This is like truly a topic that I'm so deeply passionate about.
Mm.
Um, what you were sharing about the leaders that we're seeing, it's really interesting because as I shift more into my observer era of my human design, it's
Mm.
been really wild to just sit back and watch how things are
Mhm.
moving. And it's like the same people who are shedding light on what's happening in the world are the same people who are utilizing shame behavior. It's the same people who are placing themselves on pedestals. It's the same exact behavior that is being shown by those in positions of perceived power in our world. And yet
Mhm.
they're claiming to be different because they are quote unquote conscious. There's
Right.
nothing conscious about that. There's nothing conscious about attempting to place yourself above others or
Mhm.
claim to be better than because you have different information or hold different beliefs or different values.
Mhm.
And there's nothing conscious about serving people cookie cutter strategies to create carbon copies of who you are. Like there's nothing conscious about that. And
Mhm.
all of this behavior is like really a way of shedding the very essence of what makes us human. You know, our
Mhm.
humanity is
Mhm.
being lost. And yes, we can blame social media for the amplification of this process, but it's only amplifying what was already there, right?
Mhm.
And how it's amplifying this is it's just amplifying the insecurities of these leaders. And
Yeah.
so then they start to show up in ways to mask the insecurities, which ends up being a really weird power dynamic.
Yeah.
What's needed are, you know, we hear these words as trendy words: authenticity, humility, vulnerability, transparency. Like all of these like are such um trendy words, yet if you really start to dive into the deep understanding of it, what does it mean to be transparent online, for example? I show up in a very transparent way and I don't show you everything. You know, I
Mhm.
don't show you everything. I keep a lot of my life private. I used to show a lot of my relationship and my marriage, and I've chosen to keep a lot of that private just because it feels really sacred. I keep a lot of my
Mhm.
client work private because that feels really sacred, and I just show enough to um, market what I do, but not
Mhm.
so much that it breaches upon the sacred safety of the containers that I hold.
Yeah.
So when we talk about, when I mention like transparency, this isn't about showing the world everything that you are and all that's in your life. In fact,
Mhm.
that can be quite detrimental to your life. I know many
Mhm.
influential leaders who are constantly storying their life, but behind the scenes, they're depleted, exhausted, have shitty relationships, and, you
Mhm.
know, the list goes
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
This is about showing enough of your humanness
Mhm.
and being humble enough to show that humanness. I could have
Mhm.
very well hid the fact that I was navigating trauma. I could have very well hid the fact that I was navigating depression and PTSD and social anxiety over these past 2 years, just to, as an attempt to preserve my image.
Mhm.
But for me, that didn't feel an integrity. It also didn't feel an integrity to serve as much as I had been serving during
Mhm.
that time because I knew
Yeah.
that my bandwidth and my capacity had decreased. And this is the authentic piece. You know, again, some people misconstrue authenticity as like you got to show them everything, and it's not that. It's just about showing up in a way that feels aligned with your truth. The reason why
Mhm.
so many people have difficulty doing this, you know, embodying humility, transparency, authenticity, vulnerability, is because they actually haven't taken the time to understand who they are beneath
Yeah.
the identities and the personas
Yeah.
that they've created.
Mhm.
And that is the missing piece, and that's where my work comes in, and that's why I focus on the inner work, because anyone can put a 5-step strategy into play. It's not that hard. If a business coach gives you a strategy, it's pretty fucking easy to follow.
Yeah.
The reason why we struggle is because we try to put strategies into place that aren't actually in alignment with how we want to show up,
Mhm.
or um, we have yet to work through the trauma traumas and the wounding that is preventing us from showing up and serving the way in which we do, the way in which we desire doing. And so the inner work is really, really important. And that is how we start to cultivate a deeper relationship with self, which is then how we begin to show up in more of our potency.
Mhm. I couldn't agree more. I thank you. Yes. Exclamation mark. Bold. Fire flames. Yeah, it's like that that I come back to it all the time, and it comes up in conversations with clients all the time in my community. It's like the ultimate reclamation, like to me, and like where this podcast title even came from, is the all of the pieces that bring us back to that knowing at the core of who we are, and it's almost hard to explain that to someone who isn't maybe familiar with the dialogue that we're having, and what that even means, like to know yourself deeper, to deepen into relationship with yourself. Like, what the hell does that even mean? And in it, it's like I really do struggle with explaining how fucking important that is and what that actually looks like, with the way, even the way the world is. If you don't have a knowing at your core of who you are and what you stand for, the last few years might have been a trip, and like it's not going to get any easier if you don't have your like I'm standing in my knowingness here.
Yeah.
And what a gift to have that. And I think, like, for me, and this is kind of an interesting segue, that I first started to find that in my later 30s. Like, it wasn't until like probably 35, and it was psilocybin that like started to bring me back home. And thank God for that. And up until that point, I was really judgmental about what I then would call drugs, which I now call medicine.
Mhm.
And maybe we can segue into that, unless there's still that you want to somewhere you want to share on what we were just speaking on. But
One thing I do want to, just to what you were sharing about, you struggle explaining it. Sometimes I really dumb it down,
okay,
and
tell
I
me.
share it in terms of like a relationship. You know, you go on a first date with someone, things seem pretty cool, and you're like, okay, I want to get to know this person. So what do? You get to know that person. This is the
Mhm,
same process. You get to know yourself. But just as you
mhm,
would get to know someone you're about to date, like your eyes are going to be wide open to their shadows. Your eyes are going to
mhm.
be wide open to seeing their faults and all the things that they're, usually we tend to see what they're doing wrong versus what they're doing right. Like
Yeah.
we see the red flags. This is about understanding those shadows, those faults, those red flags within yourself. This is about being able to see the full spectrum of who you are and getting to know yourself
Mhm,
so that you can actually drop into a real relationship with self versus just
mhm,
operating on autopilot, assuming that you know yourself when really you're just believing what you were taught to believe, acting how
mhm,
you were taught to act, doing
mhm.
what you were taught to do, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's those that have always missed the red flags
Oh,
and forged
I feel
forward anyway.
I feel like we've all had that season, let's call it, in our lives.
Mhm. I don't know what you're talking about. Oh my gosh.
Well,
Oh
plant
yeah,
medicine.
let's go there.
Um, yeah, I became sober in 2014,
Mhm.
and that,
Congratulations.
thank you. And
Mhm.
that is actually exactly when ayahuasca started showing up in
Mm.
my life, in conversations, in like on the internet, just like in really, really weird ways. Articles would pop up,
Mhm.
and I hadn't really dug into her. And at that time, being freshly sober, it was just, I didn't have the context to really understand. The only thing that I saw was, oh, psychedelic. I don't want to go there. Like
Yeah.
I'm like just learning for the first time in 30 something years to feel my feelings. I
Yeah.
think I'll just be here for a bit.
Yeah.
And then in 2017, I started having a lot of health issues that, well, first of all, my business exploded in 2016, 2017.
Mhm.
And Um, I was doing a lot. I was doing like 3 day, 100-person events in LA. I was doing
Mm.
retreats. I had group programs, one on one. I had my podcast. Like a lot was going on and things were
Yeah.
going really well. But I kept coming up against some health issues that were really mysterious. I don't see allopathic medicine. I tend
Mhm.
to stick to more Eastern and um, holistic. But at that time, I was seeking everything
Yeah.
and nothing was helping. And that's when ayahuasca came back in really loud and clear. And I started exploring my relationship with her and dove deep. You know, it's been a really deep, long study with her, and it's involved multiple dietas in the Amazon jungle with my maestro. And she opened my eyes first to combo. Combo helped me heal what all like Western, Eastern, allopathic medicines that I couldn't heal. And then
Mhm.
combo introduced me to other things such as bufo.
Mhm.
Psilocybin was kind of weaved in there
Mhm.
as well. And um, it's been a really, really interesting unraveling because it seems like that has been the only work that supported me in really breaking down a lot of the barriers, both from just this lifetime and generationally,
Mhm.
um, as well as, you know, the cultural, um, all the cultural walls that have been built up to as an Indian woman,
Mhm.
the protective mechanisms. It's just been the only thing that's really supported me in breaking that down. And at the same time, like I've also been doing all the other work alongside of that. So I
Yeah.
always tell my clients the ceremony doesn't end in the Maloka, the ceremony continues. You know, once you're
Mhm.
on this path, it's like you're in one long ceremony that
Yeah.
doesn't end. Um, and it's a beautiful process, and it's not for everyone, and it is for everyone. It's just important to follow what really calls you in.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, the a woman that I work with a lot speaks to like the actual ceremony being really 20%, and then what happens after you leave ceremony. That's the 80%. That's the work that, that's the whole maybe purpose isn't the right word, but it's like, okay, you can read a book and learn all of these things, and then are you going to do anything with it? Are you going to integrate that into your life? Are you going to like embed that into your daily practice? Because if not, then what's the point? Like coming back to some of these leaders who sit ayahuasca like 100 times. Like, do you need to sit it 100 times? Do you need to keep sitting it? And what are you doing with it? Are you even integrated from the last one? Like you just went like a month ago. What are you doing? Is always my question. That I don't know if that's a judgment, but I just know that the potency that comes out of these ceremonies is big, and I'm not sure it can be fully integrated right away. And so that might
Well,
be just a thing I need to look at in my own life.
yeah, as someone who has sat 50 plus times with multiple dietas, for me personally, because I'll speak to myself, um, integration is always part of my process. That's one. And then two, she is part of my study. So I am a student and an apprentice, and this is part of the work that I'm doing. Where I feel people fall into the trap is that they seek it for answers. And I explain this to my clients all the time. Like, we don't go to plant medicine for answers, even though that is
Mhm.
what people tell you to do, or that is what people talk about. Like, you go into these ceremonies to seek the
Mhm.
answers. No, these are simply tools,
Mhm.
just like anything else that we use in our healing journeys. Plant medicine is also a tool. You have to know how to work with that tool. You have to
Mhm.
know how to let that tool work with you. And if you're not working with that tool, then you're simply going from ceremony to ceremony, not fully integrating and perpetuating the cycle that you're in. This is
Mhm.
when people become, see, I have this belief that we, as long as we're human and living this existence, that we are always healing, because every
Mhm.
day is a new day to
Mhm.
accumulate a new trauma. And I don't, just because we are always healing doesn't mean we are broken. That's the
Yeah.
distinction.
Yeah. Thank you.
But there are people who become addicted to the healing process,
Yes.
meaning they jump from ceremony to ceremony, from container to container, from coach to
Yes.
coach, again, seeking the answer to
Yeah.
all their problems
Yeah.
versus seeing themselves as a whole being
Yeah.
on this healing journey. And it can, that distinction can get a little muddy at times, but there
Hmm.
is a distinction there, and it's a very different energy that we bring into these spaces, whether it be a
Hmm.
medicine space or a coaching container, you know.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's when people get addicted to the process, but there is
Hmm.
a way to move through the healing journey so that it is actually consistently being integrated. You're consistently um, evolving, expanding, deepening, and healing versus
Hmm.
grasping for the
Yeah.
next thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that clarity too. And I think as well, a piece of that was coming back to almost the performance topic that came up earlier. And it's some of these, at least the few people that I have in my mind right now that I was speaking about, it's almost like there's just so much sharing. Like I'm going back to sit again. I'm going back to sit again. I'm going back to sit again. And then not so much on the integration. And so as those following that don't know as much, it's like, okay, I need to be doing this thing a lot. So just that kind of, can feel a little performative.
Mm-hmm.
And to speak to you, like, I don't see you doing that, like, hey, gonna go sit again. Hey, gonna go sit again. Cause your work, like your work is your work and your journey is your journey, which I really appreciate. I really appreciate. Um, and you facilitate some medicine. You facilitate Cambo.
I do. It was just, I feel like combo is such an underrated medicine because it's not psychedelic.
Yeah.
And people often label it as the thing that you go to do a detox or get a good purge, but that's really like not how combo works. It's how it is taught by most combo schools, but that's not how it works. It's actually now I like to joke around because peptide injections are super popular. Combo is actually the original peptide injection. It's really a combination of bioactive peptides and neuropeptides that work with the body to bring it back to a state of homeostasis. So it's a very, very potent healing modality.
Mm-hmm.
And what I have found, to be honest, in my facilitation is that as more and more people are navigating these traumatic times in our collective, we're seeing more and more disembodied people, more people who want to escape, who want to flee, the
Mm-hmm.
trauma response fleeing their bodies. And so
Mm-hmm.
you're not grounded, you're not in your body, you don't even like being in your body because it's too
Mm-hmm.
painful to be in your body. And for people like that, when you go to psychedelic experiences, all that does is it feeds that part of you that wants to escape. And
Yes.
it's those people that will also often
Yes.
go back to ceremony after ceremony after
Yes.
ceremony because they feel so much better out of their body. But we live on Earth. We live in a 3D dimension and we need to learn how to be here now in these bodies.
Yeah.
And because combo is truly a physical medicine, um, it is the thing that has helped people, a lot of my clients come back into their bodies and
Mm.
really understand what it feels like to be in their bodies. And, psychedelics are amazing because it works first on your spiritual self, your energetic self, then the mental, emotional, and there can be a physical impact. But combo works in the opposite way where it works on the physical body. And
Mhm.
then that can release a lot of trapped emotions.
Yeah.
It can support your brain functionality, so it supports you on a mental level. And then there can be a spiritual component to it, but it works from the inside out. And that's why that's to me, that's the real beauty of combo. I
Yeah.
feel like that is what a lot of people need nowadays is to learn
Hmm.
how to be in their bodies and
Yeah.
stop escaping.
Yeah, I'm really glad that came up. Uh, yeah, what you were saying there about psychedelics not being maybe the best choice for people, for particular people, that's, I feel very, very important to hear, especially because speaking of trendy, like psychedelics are also becoming trendy.
Mhm.
And so thank you, thank you, thank you for that. Now, okay, with combo, oh my gosh, why can't I
I
say it
say, I
right?
mean, some people say cambo, some people say combo. I say combo.
Combo.
Yeah.
So would you say that is an experience that would be for quote unquote everybody? Like, is that an everyone welcome kind of a thing, or who maybe not so
Just
much?
just as with other medicines, there are contraindications that are mostly physical health based. So
Mm,
it's best to work with a practitioner who does do a really deep intake process to know if this is
yeah,
going to be right for you. I mean,
yeah,
any medicine should have a really thorough intake
yes,
process. If there's no intake process, run away.
yes. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Okay, beautiful. Is there anything really like what's really present on your heart? What's exciting these days? What's coming up for you?
Yeah, it's been interesting coming out of, well, still being in the traumatic event, but also I was just saying this to a friend today. Because my traumatic event is ongoing. There it's like I've been this hostage on a plane, but now I'm like the
Mm.
most regulated hostage on the hijacked plane, right?
Yeah.
Like there's still a hijacking going on, but I'm super fucking regulated and that feels great. Um
Yeah.
and coming back out into the online space. And I want to share this piece just because we've been talking about trauma, we've been talking about leadership, and I think it's really important for people to understand that we go through seasons.
Yeah.
We go through seasons in our lives, we go through seasons in our relationships, and we're going to go through seasons in our entrepreneurship and our work and the way in which we lead our lives. And
Mhm.
we are not meant to be these one dimensional, singular, seasoned people. We are meant to live in cyclical cycles, just like the earth, just
Mhm.
like everything around us, everything on this
Mhm.
planet is cyclical. So
Yeah.
when we go through these really tough times, don't be afraid to take a step back and tend to your needs. It's
Mhm.
so, so important. If I hadn't done that,
Mhm.
I would probably be one of those people out there who is pushing against everything in their being and burning out constantly and going into states of freeze constantly
Mhm.
because I'm not really tending to what my nervous system is asking of me.
Yeah.
And I chose to slow down while still making money in the background. Thank God for referrals.
Mhm. Mhm.
um, and as I start to emerge back into the online world, which has really just been this year, but mostly in the last month,
Yeah.
and bring my offerings back and start working my group programs again, start enrolling for potent leaders again, like the human part of me is scared,
Yeah.
because it really does feel like for the first time in 10 years, I am in a position where I've had to rebuild. I
Right.
fired my team when all this went down. I said no, I had to say no to all the opportunities that were on my table. I had to put my
Yeah.
podcast on hold, relaunch, put on hold again.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I really surrendered everything that I was able to really dive deeper into my healing. So now, as I come back out, there's this really interesting dynamic between rebirth and death that is
Mhm.
still taking place. I feel most people have this perception of the death and rebirth process that there's a death and
Mhm.
then there's a rebirth. And I wish it was that, you know, but it wasn't until I fully surrendered to the fact that wait, there isn't going to be a hard line on this death, and I think I'm going
Mhm.
to be navigating and dancing in both spaces for a while, the death and the rebirth, the loss
Yeah.
and what is coming through. And when we allow ourselves to surrender in that place of the in
Mhm.
between death and
Mhm.
rebirth,
Yeah.
so much more becomes activated.
Yeah.
And that is just something I really want people to know because I do feel, I don't know if you've noticed this too, but like there's a lot of people going through some pretty intense seasons of death in
Yeah.
their lives right now.
Yeah.
And a lot of these same people are hiding it
Yeah.
eh, due to fear of being perceived a certain way, due to fear of
Yeah.
being seen differently, or, they're just trying to hold on so hard to their image and their
Hmm.
persona that they're not letting themselves move through life the way that life wants them to move through it. And
Yeah.
as someone who just went through this and is still going through this, is it hard to let go of the identities? Yeah, that piece has been the hardest. I didn't even know I still had identities around shit. And it's like when you lose everything, your podcast, your business, like the ability to
Right.
work out, your body, like your health, you start to face some pretty hard truths and
Yeah.
dark places. Yet those places need to be met, they need to
Yeah.
be seen. And so, for anyone who is in that process, the seasons of death, because trust me, there's a lot of people. Um,
Hmm.
please know that you're not alone.
Yeah.
Like there's so many people going through this right now, and the best way to go through it is to allow it to happen.
Mhm.
Sometimes I feel like allow is, for me at least, works better than surrender. Surrender always feels
Yeah.
so passive, and as someone who likes to be
Yeah.
in control, like
Yeah.
like what do you want me to surrender? But when I say allow, I'm like, oh, that's a conscious choice to just allow it to happen, to allow it to
Hmm.
unfold, to allow it to fall
Hmm.
apart. Um, yeah, so just allow and know
Hmm.
that the version of you that you're going to meet on the other side is going to be different,
Hmm.
and it's going to be a version of you that is found beneath all of the constructs and identities that you felt you had to create.
Yeah. It's like it's a version of you that is like it's just been waiting, like just been waiting to be here.
Mm-hmm.
And they know what to do. That version is like ready, it's ready to be here.
Mm-hmm.
Mm, thank you for that.
Of course.
Where can people find you? All the things. Where do we find you? What are you
Um,
offering? What's coming up?
yeah. So my website, rubyfremon.com. And right now I'm currently enrolling. I don't know when this is going out, but I'm currently enrolling for Potent Leaders. And
When is
that is
Potent Leaders starting?
we start in April.
Okay.
So that is my 4-month intimate group mentorship for leaders who are really seeking to not fall into the trap of performance and instead get to know who they are and bring
Yeah.
more of that potency and medicine into their work. I also do work with clients one on one with
Hmm.
guidance sessions or longer containers, both with or without medicine work. And for social media, I tend to spend the most time on Instagram.
Hmm.
And my handle on all social media platforms is at I am Ruby. And then I also have a Substack, which is where I put my long form writing. And I have a book called Potent Leadership. So if you dig this episode, you will definitely dig the book. Um, yeah, I think that's everything.
Okay. I'll bundle it all up and pop it in the show notes. We can probably get this out. When in April does Potent Leaders
Oh,
start?
it's a beginning April 1st.
Okay.
Enrollment ends
Okay.
March 26th. Yeah.
Okay, we'll see what we can do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you so much for spending your time with me and sharing with us today. It's been really, really special and lots of good insights and downloads and nuggets to deepen into. So thank you.
Yeah, Kyla, thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor to just be here and share this space with you.
Yeah, likewise, girl. I'll see you another time.
Okay.